At my engagement dinner, my mother lifted her glass, smiled across the table, and called my sister the only successful daughter I ever raised. There were 23 people in the private dining room. My fiancé's parents were there, my future sister-in-law was there, two of my closest friends were there. And sitting beside my mother, dressed in a cream designer suit, was my younger sister, Rachel, wearing the satisfied expression of someone receiving an award she had expected all along. Everyone looked at me. They were waiting to see whether I would laugh, cry, or pretend I had not heard. I did none of those things. I took a sip of water, placed the glass back on the table, and said, "That is an interesting toast, Mom." Before she could respond, the dining room doors opened. The restaurant owner walked in carrying a bottle of champagne. He looked directly at me and said, "There you are. I have been trying to find the woman who saved this place." My mother's smile disappeared. My name is Natalie Brooks. I was 33 years old when this happened, and until that evening, my family believed I had spent the previous 2 years drifting from one failed job to another. That was not entirely their fault. I had stopped explaining my life to people who listened only long enough to compare it with Rachel's. Rachel was 3 years younger than me and had always been the daughter my parents understood. She was polished, social, ambitious, and very good at presenting every achievement in the most impressive possible way. When she earned a promotion, she sent a family email with the new title in the subject line. When she bought a condominium, she hosted a housewarming party and hired a photographer. When she was mentioned in a local business magazine, my mother purchased 10 copies and mailed them to relatives. Rachel worked in pharmaceutical sales and earned a comfortable income. She was successful. The problem was not that my parents were proud of her. The problem was that they needed her success to prove that I was a disappointment. I had taken a different path. After college, I worked as a financial analyst for a large hospitality company. The job paid well, looked respectable on paper, and made me miserable. I spent most of my days reviewing struggling hotels and restaurants, identifying where they were losing money, and creating plans that senior executives presented as their own. I was good at the work. I was not good at pretending I enjoyed the company. By 30, I had savings, experience, and a growing certainty that I did not want to spend another decade helping wealthy corporations improve businesses they barely understood. So I resigned. My parents reacted as though I had walked away from a medical career to join a traveling circus. My father asked whether I had been fired. My mother wanted to know what she was supposed to tell people. Rachel said leaving a secure job without another title lined up was irresponsible. I told them I planned to work independently with small restaurants and family-owned hospitality businesses. My mother stared at me. "So you are going to give advice to cafes? That is one way to describe it. What will your actual job be?" "I will help businesses understand their costs, pricing, staffing, and operations." Rachel laughed. "So consulting." "Yes." "Do you have clients?" "Not yet." That answer became the only part of the conversation anyone remembered. For the next year, every family gathering included some version of the same question. Had I found a real job yet? Was I still doing my little restaurant project? Did I miss having benefits? Was I worried about falling behind? At first, I tried to explain. I told them about the bakery, whose ingredient waste I reduced by 18%. I told them about the cafe I helped restructure so the owners could avoid closing. I told them about the small hotel restaurant where I redesigned the menu pricing and trained the management team. My parents nodded politely and changed the subject. Then Rachel would describe a sales conference, a new client, or an executive she had met, and everyone would become interested again. Eventually, I stopped sharing details. That was how my family missed the biggest opportunity of my career. 18 months before my engagement dinner, I met a man named Arthur Bell. Arthur owned Bell and Ash, an elegant but aging restaurant in the historic district. 30 years earlier, the restaurant had been one of the most respected places in the city. By the time I walked through its doors, it was losing money every month. The dining room was beautiful, but the menu was too large. The kitchen was inefficient, and the staffing schedule had not been updated in years. Arthur was 71 and exhausted. His wife had died the previous spring. His son lived across the country and had no interest in running a restaurant. Arthur was preparing to sell the building and close the business. A chef I had previously worked with introduced us. Arthur agreed to meet me for 20 minutes. We spoke for almost 3 hours. I did not promise him miracles. I showed him the numbers. I explained which dishes were losing money, where inventory was disappearing, why his private event business had declined, and how much revenue the upstairs dining rooms could generate if they were marketed properly. Arthur asked what it would cost to hire me. I gave him a 6-month consulting proposal. He said he could afford only half of it. So I offered another arrangement. I would accept a lower monthly fee in exchange for a percentage of any measurable increase in operating profit. Arthur looked at me for a long time. Then he held out his hand. Within 4 months, Bell and Ash stopped losing money. Within 8 months, the private event calendar was nearly full. I reduced the menu, renegotiated supplier agreements, introduced a reservation deposit policy, and helped Arthur hire an experienced general manager. The restaurant did not become successful because of one clever idea. It became successful because dozens of small problems were finally addressed by people willing to face them honestly. Arthur and I developed a close professional relationship. He respected my judgment. I respected what the restaurant meant to him. A year after we started working together, he asked whether I would consider becoming a minority partner. He did not want to sell Bell and Ash to a chain. He wanted someone involved who understood both the finances and the soul of the business. I invested part of my savings and earned additional equity through the turnaround agreement. By the time I became engaged, I owned 25% of Bell and Ash and had begun advising 2 other restaurants through my own consulting company. I was earning more than I had earned at my corporate job. But my parents knew none of that. They knew I worked around restaurants. They knew my schedule was flexible. They knew I did not wear a suit every morning or post professional announcements online. To them, that meant I was still trying to find my way. My fiancé, Evan, understood the situation better than anyone. He was a high school history teacher, which meant my mother initially treated his career with the same polite concern she reserved for mine. Evan did not care. He liked his work, lived within his means, and had no interest in impressing people who measured worth through job titles. We met at a community fundraiser hosted at Bell and Ash. He had come with another teacher. I was helping Arthur manage the event. Evan assumed I worked for the restaurant. Unlike my family, he asked what I actually did. By the end of the night, we had spoken about restaurants, education, family expectations, and why both of us disliked networking events. 2 years later, he proposed during a weekend hike. Our engagement dinner was planned for the following month. Evan's parents offered to host something small at their home, but my mother insisted on organizing a formal dinner. She said it was important for both families to meet properly. Rachel suggested Bell and Ash. She had recently attended a pharmaceutical event there and was impressed by the private dining rooms. When my mother called to ask whether I could get a discount, I told her I would speak with the restaurant. I arranged the dinner at cost. I did not tell her why I had the authority to do that. A small part of me wondered whether the evening might be different. I was not expecting praise. I simply hoped my mother could get through one celebration without turning it into a comparison between her daughters. For the first hour, everything went well. Evan's father told stories about Evan as a child. My best friend, Simone, described how Evan and I had met. Rachel asked reasonable questions and even complimented my dress. Then my mother began talking about careers. It started with Evan's younger brother, who had recently completed medical school. My mother praised his discipline. Then she turned to Rachel and asked her to tell everyone about her promotion. Rachel smiled modestly before giving a detailed explanation of her new regional position. She mentioned the larger territory, the increased compensation, and the company car. Everyone congratulated her. I did too. Rachel had worked hard for the promotion. Then my mother looked at me. And Natalie is still working on her restaurant consulting idea. The word idea hung in the air. I said, "It is a business, Mom." She waved one hand. Yes, of course, a business. Her tone made it clear she believed she was being generous. Evan's mother asked what kind of restaurants I worked with. I started to answer, but Rachel interrupted. Natalie helps smaller places with their menus and budgets. Again, technically true. Just carefully reduced. My father added, she used to have a very good corporate position. The table became uncomfortable. Evan placed his hand over mine beneath the table. I could feel him asking a question without speaking. Did I want him to intervene? I shook my head slightly. My mother stood to make a toast a few minutes later. She thanked everyone for coming. She welcomed Evan's family. She said she hoped Evan would provide me with the stability I had always resisted creating for myself. Several people looked down at their plates. Then she turned toward Rachel. "At least I never have to worry about this one," she said. "Rachel is the only successful daughter I ever raised." Rachel gave a small laugh. "Mom." But she did not look embarrassed. She looked pleased. My mother lifted her glass higher. "To success, stability, and making choices you will not regret." No one joined the toast. I looked at my mother and felt something surprising. Not anger. Clarity. For years, I had believed that if I became successful enough, my family would eventually see me differently. But success was never the missing ingredient. Curiosity was. They had already decided who I was. Any fact that contradicted that story had simply been ignored. "That is an interesting toast, Mom," I said. Her smile tightened. "I am only being honest." Before I could respond, the dining room doors opened. Arthur walked in carrying a bottle of vintage champagne. He had been attending a meeting downstairs and had only just learned that my engagement dinner was happening upstairs. "There you are," he said to me. "I have been trying to find the woman who saved this place." The room went quiet. Arthur walked to my chair and kissed my cheek. Then he shook Evan's hand. "Congratulations, you are marrying the best business partner I have ever had." My mother lowered her glass. Rachel stared at him. Arthur placed the champagne on the table. "I hope you do not mind the interruption," he said, "but Natalie never lets anyone celebrate her properly." My father cleared his throat. "You work with Natalie." Arthur smiled. "I am fortunate enough to work with her." Rachel asked, "Are you the owner?" "I am one of them." He rested a hand on the back of my chair. "Natalie owns a quarter of Bell and Ash. More importantly, she is the reason there is still a Bell and Ash to own." No one spoke. Arthur continued, unaware of the full tension he had walked into. "When we met, I was preparing to close. She rebuilt the financial model, reorganized operations, and brought the private event business back to life. We had our strongest year in more than a decade because of her." My mother sat down slowly. "You own part of this restaurant?" "Yes," I said. "For how long?" "Almost a year." "Why did you not tell us?" I looked at her. "I tried to tell you what I was building. You kept calling it an idea." My father frowned. "You should have explained it more clearly." "I explained it many times." Rachel folded her arms. "So you arranged this entire dinner." "I approved it." "Did you pay for it?" "I arranged the room and service at cost." My mother looked around the dining room as though seeing it for the first time. All evening, she had treated the restaurant as evidence of Rachel's sophisticated taste. Now she understood that I had helped build the very place where she had publicly dismissed me. Arthur finally noticed that something was wrong. He looked at me. "Did I interrupt at a bad moment?" "No," Evan said. "Your timing was perfect." A few people laughed softly. My mother did not. She looked humiliated. In the past, I would have rushed to rescue her. I would have explained that she had not known. I would have changed the subject. I would have found a way to make the truth less uncomfortable for everyone except me. This time, I let the silence remain. Rachel was the first to break it. "Well, owning part of one restaurant does not mean Mom was trying to insult you." I turned toward her. "She called you her only successful daughter at my engagement dinner." Rachel looked away. My mother said, I was making a toast. I used the wrong words. You used the words you believed. That is not fair. What part is unfair? She opened her mouth, then closed it. I continued calmly. You believed I was unsuccessful because my work did not look like Rachel's. You never asked how many clients I had. You never asked what I earned. You never asked what happened with the restaurants I helped. You only asked whether I had found a real job. My father said, parents worry. Worry asks questions. Judgment makes conclusions. Arthur quietly excused himself, telling us to enjoy the champagne. Before leaving, he looked at me and said, for what it is worth, I have trusted very few people with this business. Trusting you was one of the best decisions I made. Then he closed the doors behind him. The rest of the dinner was not comfortable. But it was honest. My mother apologized to Evan's parents for the tension. Evan's mother told her gently that the tension had not come from me. My father barely spoke. Rachel became defensive and said she had never asked to be compared with me. I told her that was true. She had not created the family pattern. But she had benefited from it, and she had rarely challenged it. That was harder for her to hear. Evan and I left before dessert. Outside the restaurant, I started laughing. Not because the evening had been funny. Because the pressure I had carried for years suddenly felt lighter. Evan asked whether I was all right. I think so. Do you regret not telling them sooner? I thought about it. No, I regret believing that one perfect achievement would finally make them understand me. He took my hand. For the record, I was impressed before I knew you owned a restaurant. You thought I managed coat checks. I thought you managed them extremely well. I laughed again. My mother called the next morning. She began by saying she had barely slept. Then she asked why I had hidden such an important part of my life. I told her the truth. I did not hide it. I stopped offering information that you repeatedly dismissed. She was silent. Then she said, I am proud of you. I had waited years to hear those words. When they finally came, they did not repair everything. But they mattered. I thanked her. Then I told her pride was not enough. If she wanted a relationship with me, she had to stop using Rachel as the standard by which my life was measured. She also needed to apologize to Evan for implying that I was marrying him for stability. She agreed. My father took longer. He struggled to understand why his comments had been hurtful when he believed he had only been practical. But over time, he began asking actual questions. Not questions designed to confirm his opinion. Real questions. How did restaurant equity work? What did a consulting project involve? What risks had I taken? What was I planning next? Rachel and I had the most difficult conversation. She admitted that being the favorite had not always felt good. It meant she was expected to succeed publicly and constantly. She had learned to announce every achievement because praise was the safest form of attention in our family. I understood that. But understanding did not mean pretending she had never used the comparisons to elevate herself. We agreed that if our parents compared us again, neither of us would participate. The first test came at a family lunch 2 months later. My mother mentioned Rachel's new company car, then started to say, at least one of my daughters knows how to enjoy success. Rachel interrupted her. Natalie owns part of a restaurant, Mom. We are not doing this anymore. It was a small moment. But it was the first time my sister had stepped out of the role our family had written for her. Evan and I married the following spring. We did not hold the wedding at Bell and Ash. That surprised everyone. The restaurant was important to me, but I wanted our wedding to belong to our relationship, not to the lesson my family had learned there. We chose a botanical garden and invited fewer than 70 people. Arthur attended with his son. During his toast, he did not mention money, ownership, or professional success. He said that the strongest people he knew were not the loudest people in the room. They were the people who could see value before everyone else recognized it. For most of my life, I thought success would protect me from being misunderstood. It does not. People can ignore an impressive title. They can dismiss a growing business. They can sit inside something you helped build and still decide you have built nothing. That is why I no longer measure my life by whether my family understands it. My work is real even when I do not announce it. My choices are valid even when they do not resemble my sister's. And my success does not require someone else to be called a failure. My mother's toast was meant to define me in front of an entire room. But the truth did not need an argument. It simply walked through the door.